They gave me my badge, my brother didn't come. I told myself he was busy. I told myself traffic, work, something came up. I stood in that federal building in downtown Chicago with my right hand raised and my chest full of something I didn't have a name for yet, and I scanned the back row one more time. Empty seat. I looked back at the flag and finished my oath. That was 6 years ago. I should have known then. My name is Vivian Hale. I'm 31 years old. I'm a special agent with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. And 3 weeks ago, my brother stood in front of a Senate subcommittee and told them I had fabricated evidence to close a case that made me famous. He said I had done it for career advancement. He said he had proof. He had no idea what I had done to prepare for that moment. I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, the kind of suburb where every lawn is green by committee and everyone knows what car you drive. My father worked in insurance. My mother taught 4th grade until her knees gave out. My brother Owen, he's 4 years older than me, was the one everyone talked about. Quarterback. Homecoming court. Full ride to Northwestern on an academic scholarship. I was the quiet one. The one who read too much. The one who spent her summers at the public library because it was air-conditioned and nobody asked her to perform. Owen and I were never close in the way siblings on TV are close. We didn't confide in each other. We didn't call on birthdays unless our mother made us. But we were decent to each other, the way strangers who share a last name can be decent. And I thought that was enough. I thought blood counted for something even when love didn't. I joined the bureau at 24. I'd done 2 years at Deloitte after getting my accounting degree, then applied on a Tuesday night after working until 11 auditing a client who I was almost certain was cooking their books and watching my supervisor pretend not to notice. I wanted to work somewhere that let me do something about it. The FBI said yes. I said yes back. Owen thought it was reckless. You're giving up a real career, he told me over the phone. I remember I was sitting on the edge of my bed in my studio apartment in the Loop, still in my work clothes. Federal salaries cap out. You know that, right? You'll be 50 and wondering why your colleagues from college are retiring early and you're still punching a time card. I told him I didn't care about that. He laughed in a way that wasn't unkind, but wasn't kind either. You never did, he said, and hung up. He wasn't wrong. I didn't care. I cared about the work. For 3 years, I was nobody. Processing requests, reviewing documents, sitting in on interviews as the junior agent who didn't speak unless spoken to. I was fine with that. I was learning. I was building a vocabulary for the way money moves when people are trying to hide it. The tiny seams in financial records where the lie starts to show. It's not glamorous work. It looks like spreadsheets and subpoenas and phone calls that go unreturned for weeks. But I was good at it in a way I'd never been good at anything social or visible. And that mattered to me privately, and the way things only matter when no one else knows about them. The Ardmore case changed everything. Ardmore Capital was a private equity firm based in Wilmette, which meant it had the kind of address that made regulators slow to question and partners slow to leave. The managing director was a man named Franklin Greer, 63, silver-haired, the kind of man who gets quoted in the Tribune and goes to the same barber for 40 years. He had built Ardmore over 2 decades. He had built Ardmore over 2 decades. He had a foundation. He gave to children's hospitals. He had also been running a long-form Ponzi scheme that had drained approximately $47 million from pension funds across 3 states, most of it belonging to retired teachers and municipal workers in the Midwest. I found the first thread on a Tuesday in March. It was buried in a quarterly report, a rounding inconsistency so small that it would have been noise if I hadn't seen the same pattern in a completely different document 6 months earlier. I didn't tell anyone. I stayed late. I pulled everything I could pull. I built the case in a notebook I kept locked in my desk drawer. And when I finally had enough to bring to my supervisor, I brought it quietly, with documentation, and watched his face go through 5 different expressions in about 40 seconds. The investigation took 14 months. Franklin Greer was indicted. He pled guilty. He's serving 9 years at a federal prison in Duluth. The teachers got most of their money back through asset recovery. I testified at the sentencing hearing, and the judge said something about the quality of the investigative work that I have never repeated to another person because I didn't want it to become something I was performing. After that, I got promoted. I moved to a bigger office. People knew my name who hadn't known it before, and somewhere in that stretch of months, my brother started calling me again. At first, I didn't think much of it. Owen was living in Oak Park by then, working as a financial consultant for a mid-size wealth management firm. He'd gotten married, had a daughter who I'd met twice, had the life our parents had wanted for both of us. We had dinner a few times. He asked questions about my work that seemed, at the time, like curiosity. I answered them carefully, the way I'd been trained to answer questions about active matters, vague, general, nothing specific. But some of what I said was specific enough. I see that now. I see a lot of things now that I didn't see then. It started with small favors. Owen called me one evening and asked if I knew anyone at the SEC. Not for anything improper, he said. A client of his was dealing with a filing issue and he just wanted to know who to talk to. I gave him a name. I thought nothing of it. Then there was the question about how financial crime investigations typically begin. Academic curiosity, he said. He was thinking of writing something, maybe a piece for a trade publication. I gave him a framework. General stuff. Nothing confidential. Then, in January of this year, he asked me directly about a case I was working. I didn't answer that one. I said I couldn't talk about it. He said he understood. He changed the subject. We talked about our mother's knee surgery. I went home and wrote down the date and time of the call in the notebook I still keep, out of habit, locked in my desk. 2 weeks later, my supervisor called me in and told me that an anonymous tip had been filed with the Office of Inspector General alleging that I had mishandled evidence in the Ardmore case. Specifically, that I had altered a document to strengthen the timeline before presenting it to the grand jury. I sat very still in that chair. I said, "When was the tip filed?" He checked. 11 days ago. I said, "Okay." He told me there would be an internal review. He told me it was standard procedure and not to read anything into it. I nodded and went back to my desk and sat there for 40 minutes without moving. Then I picked up my phone and called someone I trusted more than I'd ever trusted my brother. Her name is Cecilia Marsh. She's been my mentor since my 3rd year with the Bureau. She doesn't have the kind of title that makes people nervous, but she has the kind of mind that makes people careful, and she has never once given me advice that was wrong. I told her everything. The calls, the questions, the timeline, the tip. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Vivian, I want you to keep doing your job exactly as you have been. Don't change a single thing. And I want you to document every interaction you have with your brother from this point forward." I said, "You think he's involved." She said, "I think you already do too." She wasn't wrong. What I didn't tell Cecilia that day, what I hadn't told anyone, was that 2 months before the tip was filed, I had noticed something in Owen's financial disclosures. Not his firm's. I'd been reviewing a separate matter, a routine referral, and Ardmore Capital came up in a cross-reference. Not Franklin Greer's Ardmore, a new entity. An LLC registered in Delaware under a name that was close but not identical. The kind of close that's designed to look like a typo rather than a deception. The LLC had received a consulting payment from an offshore account that I had flagged in my original Ardmore investigation, but hadn't been able to fully trace. At the time, it led nowhere and I closed that thread. Now it led somewhere. It led to a firm that Owen's employer had done business with for 3 years. I didn't know then whether Owen knew. I didn't know whether he was being used or whether he was a willing participant. What I knew was that if I started pulling that thread officially, whoever was watching would know I was watching, and I would lose the only advantage I had, which was that they thought they had already won. So I kept going to work. I kept reviewing documents. I kept my face neutral in every meeting. And I called my brother every 2 weeks like nothing had changed, and I listened very carefully to everything he said. In April, he invited me to dinner. "Just the 2 of us," he said. Our parents were going to Florida for 2 weeks and he wanted to catch up. We went to a restaurant in River North, the kind of place where the wine list has a separate binding. He ordered a bottle that cost more than my car payment. "You've been quiet lately," he said. I said I'd had a lot going on with work. He tilted his head. "The review still ongoing?" I hadn't told him about the review. I had told no one outside the Bureau. I watched his face while I said, "What review?" And I watched him realize 1/2 second too late that he shouldn't have known to ask. He recovered fast. He said someone from our mother's church had mentioned something. They knew someone who worked downtown. I said that was strange, that reviews like that weren't publicized. He poured more wine. He changed the subject. We talked about his daughter's soccer league. I drove home and wrote it down. By May, I had enough. Not enough to feel certain. I don't think certainty is a feeling I trust, but enough to bring to Cecilia, who brought it to people above her, and the matter left my hands in the way that matters sometimes leave your hands when you've done everything you can do with them. I kept working. I kept answering Owen's calls. I kept my voice the same. The Senate subcommittee hearing was announced in June. It was a routine oversight hearing on financial crime investigation practices, the kind of thing that gets C-SPAN coverage and no one else. My supervisor called me to say that my name had come up in connection with the Ardmore case. Complimentary, he said. The committee wanted to highlight a successful investigation as a model, and that I might be called to submit a statement. I said that was fine. 2 days before the hearing, Owen called me. I've been asked to testify, he said. They want a private citizen perspective on how investigations affect people adjacent to high-profile cases, compliance professionals, that kind of thing. I said, I didn't know you'd been in contact with anyone on the committee. He said it had come through a colleague. Very standard. He sounded relaxed in a way I recognized as rehearsed. I said, I'll see you there then. He paused. Just half a second too long. Yeah, he said. See you there. The hearing room in the Jerkson Federal Building has that specific government building quality where everything is both grand and slightly depressing. Wood panels. High ceilings. Chairs that were never designed for comfort. I arrived early and sat in the row reserved for witnesses and watched the room fill up. Owen came in 20 minutes later. He sat 3 rows behind me on the opposite side of the aisle. He nodded when we made eye contact. I nodded back. The first hour was ordinary. The committee chair asked questions about resource allocation and interagency coordination. My supervisor gave answers. An academic gave a statement about regulatory gaps. I sat with my hands folded on the table and did not move. Then Owen was called. He walked to the witness table with the quiet confidence of a man who believes he is holding something. I'd seen that walk before. Junior partners on their way to delivering bad news to clients who didn't know it was coming. He arranged his papers. He adjusted the microphone. He looked at the committee chair and not at me. He said my name in his third sentence. He said that he had personal knowledge, through his professional network, through documents he had reviewed, that Special Agent Vivian Hale had altered a key financial record in the Ardmore investigation prior to grand jury presentation, and that the alteration had been deliberate and material to the outcome of the indictment. The room did the thing rooms do when something unexpected happens. A collective rearrangement. Chairs shifting. The soft sound of people leaning toward their neighbors. I looked at my hands on the table. I thought about a Tuesday in March, 5 years ago, when I was alone in a conference room with a quarterly report and a rounding inconsistency, and I had no idea what I was looking at yet, but something in me said, keep going. I thought about $47 million that went back to retired teachers. I thought about the notebook in my desk drawer and all the dates I had written down. The committee chair called a brief recess, and then 2 things happened at almost the same time. The first, an attorney I didn't know approached the witness table and handed the committee chair a document that I later learned was a formal referral from the Department of Justice submitted that morning, alleging that Owen's employer had received payments traceable to assets directly connected to the Ardmore scheme, and that Owen himself had signed off on those transactions. The second, Cecilia came in through the side door. She didn't rush. She never rushes. She walked to the seat beside me and sat down and said quietly without looking at me, "They have everything. It's done." I looked across the room at my brother. He was still at the witness table. He was reading the document that had been handed to the chair. I watched the rehearsed composure drain out of his face the way water drains when you pull a plug. Slowly at first, then all at once. He looked up. He found my face across that room and held it. I didn't look away. I didn't give him anything. I just looked back, the way you look at a person when there's nothing left to say and you've already made your peace with the silence. The committee chair read from the referral into the record. Owen's attorney appeared from somewhere and whispered urgently in his ear. Someone from the Inspector General's office entered through the back. There was a brief, taut exchange at the witness table that I could not hear. Owen was escorted from the room 20 minutes later. He didn't look at me again on the way out. I think he understood by then that whatever script he'd been running had ended several pages back, and he was the only one who hadn't known where the story was actually going. The hearing resumed. The committee chair said on the record that the allegations against Special Agent Hale had been fully reviewed by the Office of Inspector General and found to be without basis. He said that the Ardmore investigation had been, and I am not paraphrasing here, a model of forensic financial work that had protected the retirement savings of nearly 2,000 Illinois residents. I sat still. I didn't let myself feel it yet. I've learned to do that, to keep the feeling in a closed room inside myself until I'm somewhere private enough to open the door. It's not healthy, probably, but it's how I've survived. I called my mother that evening. She'd seen something on the local news, she said. She was crying before I finished my first sentence. I let her cry. I didn't tell her everything. I told her Owen had made a serious mistake and that there would be legal consequences and that I was okay. She asked me 3 times if I was okay. I said yes, all 3 times. The 3rd time I almost meant it. My father didn't call. I'm not sure what he knows or what he's decided. That's a door I'll open later. Owen has been charged with obstruction and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. His attorney released a statement saying he cooperated under pressure and was misled by bad actors. That may even be partly true. The full story is more complicated than my anger has sometimes made it feel. He was being used, to some degree, by people who needed someone with access and credibility to lay groundwork for discrediting me. But he also made choices. He made the choice to call me in January and ask about the case. He made the choice to sit down at that witness table. He made the choice 4 years ago not to come to my swearing in. I don't know if I'll speak to him again. I've thought about it the way you think about something you're not sure you want to decide yet. I don't feel the dramatic certainty that some people seem to feel when they cut someone off, the clean satisfaction of a door slamming shut. What I feel is closer to grief, which is inconvenient, and tired, which is also inconvenient, and underneath both of those something that might eventually become okay. I still have the notebook. I started a new one last month. Same locked drawer, different pages. There's a photo I used to keep in my wallet. Owen and me at Christmas maybe 15 years ago, before everything became complicated by ambition and distance and all the things we didn't say to each other over all those years. I looked at it for a long time one night last week. Then I put it somewhere else, not thrown away, just not in my wallet anymore. I went back to work the next morning. There were documents on my desk. There were always documents on my desk. I sat down, I opened the first file, and I looked for the place where the numbers didn't quite add up. That part, at least, I know how to do. People ask me sometimes what it felt like to sit in that hearing room while my brother said my name into a federal microphone and tried to end everything I'd spent 7 years building. They expect me to say rage or devastation. I think they want the version of me that fell apart, because that version would be more satisfying to watch reassemble itself. But the honest answer is that I felt very quiet. The kind of quiet that comes not from peace but from having already done the work. From having already sat alone with the hard questions and answered them, one at a time, in a locked notebook in a desk drawer. I've thought a lot about why Owen did what he did. Not to excuse it, just to understand it, the way you have to understand something before you can actually let it go rather than just pretend to. He wasn't a cruel person in the way that word usually gets used. He was a person who had made a series of choices, each one small enough to seem manageable, until the accumulation of them became something he couldn't walk back from without losing everything he'd told himself he was. That's not unusual. That's just what happens when you keep choosing convenience over honesty long enough. The debt eventually comes due, and by then it's too large to pay quietly. What I keep coming back to is this. He thought he knew more than he did. He thought he understood the situation he was in, the people he was dealing with, and most of all, he thought he understood me. What I had, what I knew, what I was capable of. That miscalculation cost him more than anything else. Not my preparation, not the DOJ referral, not Cecilia or the paper trail or the 14 months I spent on Ardmore. What undid him was the assumption that I was still the quiet younger sister who read too much and cared too little about the things that were supposed to matter. I think about that a lot when I'm reviewing documents now. The cases I've worked where people got caught weren't always the ones where the fraud was sloppy. Sometimes the fraud was meticulous. What got them almost every time was that they stopped paying attention to the thing they hadn't accounted for. They were so focused on what they were building that they forgot to keep watching the edges of it. Owen stopped watching me. That was his real mistake. I won't pretend the outcome has made everything clean. My mother still calls twice a week and says very little about any of it directly, the way she has always processed the things that hurt her, through silence and casseroles and careful subject changes. My father and I have spoken once since the hearing. It was brief and not unkind and resolved nothing. Those are doors that may open slowly or may not open at all, and I've stopped trying to force them on any particular timeline. What I do know is that the work I did, the 7 years of early mornings and locked notebooks and unreturned calls and testimony and precision, that work mattered. Not because it earned me recognition, though it did. Because $47 million went back to teachers and city workers who had spent their careers trusting that the money they'd set aside would still be there. Because one person staying honest in a room full of complicated incentives is not nothing. It is, in fact, almost everything. I don't think resilience is something you decide to have. I think it's something you discover you already built, in all the small moments when you chose to keep going even when nobody was watching. The notebook. The late nights. The Tuesday in March when I could have closed the file and gone home and nobody would have known. I knew. That was enough then. It's still enough now.